The gentleman, Mr. Deutsch from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I introduced this bill because I met with the Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights and asked how many investigations, ongoing investigations into cases of anti-Semitism were they pursuing? And the answer was 0, number one. Number two, I appreciate all of the academic discussion and the references to the definition. Let me just read it for the record. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish communities, institutions, and religious facilities. That's the working definition, then goes on to include contemporary examples and a fact sheet. Let me address some of what we've heard today. One, criticism of Israel any criticism of Israel would be anti-Semitic under this. It's not true. Everyone understands that that's not the case. That's number one. Number two, that Jews, because once they were victims, are immune from criticism. One, while I'm offended by that, that has nothing to do with this piece of legislation. Three, that somehow this is really some effort to go after Jewish anti-Zionists is the reddest of red herrings. And four, the suggestion was made that we have to look at all different sides. There aren't all different sides to anti-Semitism. There aren't. And the comment that was made that I find the most compelling is that a college campus is where students are trying to find their voice. I could not agree more. But here's the question. In all of this talk about free speech, which we hold dear and which we have to be careful this legislation, any legislation, would not violate or curtail. In all of that discussion, what's been missing is a discussion of the free speech of Jewish students who do not feel free to speak out. They don't feel free to support Israel openly. They don't feel free to join student government and talk about their Judaism and their involvement in their Jewish community. And there are examples time and time again. One last thing about this. I understand that if you look only in terms of numbers across all campuses, that while some of our academics here say it's not a problem, I don't see it in my classroom, I don't see it on my campus, I don't hear about it, and that 118 anti-Semitic acts relative to the number of students on college campuses may not seem that great, why shouldn't we be concerned about every one of those individuals and their ability to sustain and fight back and have a Department of Education that's willing to investigate those kinds of attacks? This one is really hard sometimes for me to understand. We know what's happening on college campuses, and yes, I'm concerned about professors being able to teach. I am. But I also know that college students like my own and their friends who are on campuses who actually see what's happening, who will avoid parts of campus, I have heard from their friends, will avoid parts of campus because they're afraid if they're wearing a Jewish star that they're going to be shouted down. That's not students finding their voice. That's one student using his or her voice to stifle the free speech of that other student. Yes, Rabbi Cooper.
Congressman Deitch, I just want to come back again to this visual because it's in real time. This was posted by a professor at Rutgers University on his Facebook page. We have a young girl, 19 years old, who went to Rutgers because she wants to get her degree in food science. This is the guy she's going to have to go and sign up for because right now there is absolutely no price to pay. There's no red line, nothing about someone in a position of responsibility who openly expresses such vile hate, and there's nothing to protect that freshman from pursuing her course.
Right. And Mr. Greenblatt, am I so off base here? Have we been going down the wrong path, worrying about the 118 cases so far of anti-Semitism so far this year?
Congressman, you're dead on. I mean, again, I know some people teach courses over the course of 15 weeks. The ADL's been tracking this for over 100 years, and data doesn't lie. And what you pointed out about the definition is exactly correct. This doesn't inhibit the ability of an individual, student, faculty, or otherwise, to criticize an Israeli policy, but it does acknowledge, as that definition does, that definition, by the way, that was done in consultation with leading experts from academia and communal organizations, and it's used by our embassies around the world to track anti-Semitic incidences. So some might not like it in its abstraction, but in its practicality, I would submit to this committee, it has been vital to our State Department doing its work to protect Jewish communities around the world.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Before I yield back, I would just finally make one last point. Again, criticism of Israel, Israel's government, Israel's policies are more than fair. They're welcome here just as they are in Israel. But when you take the position, it's one thing to criticize those policies, but when you take as your position the very suggestion that Israel as a nation does not have a right to exist, and you then try to impose that to shut down others, that is not a student finding his or her voice. That is students or others on a college campus using their voices to silence others in a way that is wholly unacceptable, which this definition is simply trying to address. And I yield back. Thank you.